He was a man people whispered about, the kind of rich man whose name could make problems disappear overnight. But that morning, in his own mansion, he froze. Not because of a rival. Not because of danger. Because of a little girl. 3 years old, standing on cold marble, wearing torn shoes so broken her tiny toes were peeking through. And what that man did next shocked everyone who knew him. Because sometimes, the hardest hearts don't break from bullets. They break from something much smaller. If stories like this touch your heart, take a moment to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. That morning in Chicago began like every other morning inside Rafe Moretti's mansion. Quiet. Controlled. Perfect. The kind of place where everything had its position, and nothing was out of line. The marble floors reflected the pale morning light. The expensive coffee machine hummed softly in the kitchen. Outside, 2 security men stood at the gate, still as statues. Inside, power lived here. Rafe Moretti sat alone at the long dining table, a table built for 12 people, but always occupied by just one. Him. 37. Wealthy beyond reason. Feared in places most people didn't even know existed. In front of him, not breakfast. Encrypted messages. Missed calls. Business that never slept. He barely touched his food. This was a man who had built his life on control, on silence, on decisions no one else could make. And then, a sound. Soft. Out of place. A tiny shuffle across marble. Rafe didn't look up at first. His instincts told him to ignore it, file it away like every other meaningless noise. But something older than instinct, made him lift his eyes. And there she was. A little girl. 3 years old. Messy curls. Big brown eyes. A stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her arms, missing one eye. She stood in the middle of a mansion worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime, like she didn't belong there, but wasn't afraid either. And then Rafe saw her shoes. They had once been pink. Now they were faded, stained, worn down to nothing. The left sole was half torn, opening with every step she took. The right shoe had no lace. And the front. There was a hole. A small, heartbreaking hole where her tiny sock peeked through. For a moment, everything inside Rafe went still. A man who had faced threats, betrayals, and danger without blinking. Couldn't say a word. "Hi," the little girl said softly. She lifted the stuffed rabbit. "This is Mr. Patch. He lost one eye, but he can still see where he's going." Rafe stared at her. 3 seconds passed. 3 long seconds where something shifted deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Then she turned. And just like that, she walked away, her broken shoes scraping lightly against the marble floor. A small sound, but it stayed with him, long after she disappeared. Because men like Rafe don't break easily. They build walls. Thick ones. Walls made of money, power, silence, and things they don't talk about. But when something finally gets through those walls, it doesn't leave a crack. It tears everything down. And that morning, it wasn't an enemy who got through. It was a little girl, in torn shoes. If you've ever seen something small change everything, tell me in the comments. I read them all. Her name was Bria. And she wasn't supposed to be there. Her mother, Darcy Campos, had spent years learning how to disappear in places like that mansion. Not literally, but enough. Enough to survive. Darcy was 27. A single mother. Working long hours just to keep life from falling apart. She moved quietly. Spoke only when needed. Kept her eyes down. In houses like this, rich houses, people like her weren't meant to be seen. They were part of the background. Like furniture. Like silence. She had been working there for nearly a year. In all that time, Rafe Moretti had spoken to her only a few times. Short, cold, distant. The kind of conversations that reminded you exactly where you stood. And Darcy understood. People like him lived in a different world. A world where everything worked perfectly, because someone else made it work. Someone like her. But Darcy didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered. Her mother needed medicine. Her daughter needed food. And life didn't give her extra chances. So she worked. Quietly. Carefully. And most importantly, she kept her daughter away from that world. Or at least, she tried to. But that morning, things had gone wrong. The neighbor who usually watched Bria wasn't available. And Darcy had no choice. She brought her to work. She kept her close. Told her to stay in the kitchen. Gave her something to eat, something to play with. Just for a few hours. Just until her shift ended. She thought she could manage it. She thought nothing would happen. But life doesn't always follow plans. Because while Darcy was busy cleaning the far side of the house, her little girl wandered. And somehow, she found her way to the one man in that mansion no one approached without permission. Rafe Moretti. By the time Darcy realized Bria wasn't in the kitchen anymore, her heart dropped. She searched fast. Quiet, but panicked. Then Preston, the house manager, appeared in the hallway. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you," he said. Those words alone were enough to make anyone nervous. But Darcy. She felt something worse. Because deep inside, she already knew why. And as she walked down that long hallway, her mind kept replaying one image. Not the mansion. Not her job. Not even the fear of losing everything. Just one thing. Her daughter. Standing there. In those torn shoes. She reached the door. Took a breath. And stepped inside. Rafe was waiting. And the look on his face was not what she expected. Not anger. Not cold. Something else. Something that made her chest tighten. "Miss Campos," he said quietly, "I met your daughter this morning." Darcy's heart stopped. And then he said something that would change both of their lives. "I saw her shoes. I saw her shoes." The words didn't come out harsh. They didn't carry judgment. That's what made them heavier. Darcy felt it in her chest, like something quietly pressing down, not loud, not aggressive, but impossible to ignore. For a moment, she didn't speak. She kept her hands folded in front of her, fingers tightening slightly against each other, holding herself together the way she always did when life got too close to breaking through. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice calm, steady, practiced. "I didn't mean for her to wander. It won't happen again." Rafe didn't move. He just looked at her. Not like a boss looking at an employee. Not like a rich man looking at someone beneath him. He was studying her. And that made Darcy more uncomfortable than anger ever could. "She didn't bother me," he said quietly. Darcy blinked once, caught off guard. "She was polite," he added, almost as if he was searching for the right word and none of them felt enough. A silence stretched between them. Darcy could feel it, that strange shift in the air. Something had changed. But she didn't know what. "I should have replaced them," she said after a moment. There it was. The truth. Simple. Honest. And heavier than any excuse she could have made. "I meant to, a while ago. Things just—" She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "Got tight." Rafe's jaw shifted slightly. Not in anger. In something else. "You're working full-time here," he said. It wasn't a question. Darcy nodded. Yes. And still, his eyes flickered briefly, not finishing the sentence out loud. Still your child is wearing shoes like that. The words didn't need to be spoken. They hung there anyway. Darcy lifted her chin just a little. Not in defiance. In dignity. "We're okay," she said. And the way she said it, it wasn't defensive. It was firm. A line drawn quietly. A mother protecting her ground. Rafe held her gaze for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then he exhaled slowly, like a man trying to process something unfamiliar. "I'm not questioning your ability," he said. "I can see you're holding things together." That surprised her. More than anything else he had said. Because it sounded like recognition. Real recognition. Not pity. Not assumption. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands against the edge of the table. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Can't get that image out of my head." Darcy's chest tightened again. "I've seen a lot of things in my life," he continued. "Things people don't walk away from." His voice was calm, but there was weight in it. "History. I've made decisions that don't let you sleep easy," he added, almost under his breath. Then his eyes returned to her. But that little girl standing there, smiling, like nothing was wrong. He shook his head slightly. That stayed. Darcy swallowed. Because for the first time, she wasn't standing in front of a powerful man. She was standing in front of someone who had been affected. And that was more dangerous. More unpredictable. "I didn't come here to make you feel bad," he said. "I want to help." There it was. The word she had been expecting. But not like this. Not from him. Darcy's posture didn't change, but something inside her immediately pulled back. "We don't need charity," she said gently. Not rude. Not sharp. Just clear. Rafe nodded once. "I figured you'd say that." His tone wasn't offended. If anything, there was a trace of respect in it. "This isn't charity," he continued. "It's something else." Darcy frowned slightly. "Then what is it?" Rafe didn't answer right away. And for the first time since she'd known him, he looked unsure. Not weak. Just human. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know I can't ignore it." That honesty hit differently. It wasn't polished. It wasn't calculated. It was raw, and a little uncomfortable. "I want to take her to get new shoes," he said. The words landed simply, but the meaning behind them was anything but simple. Darcy's eyes flickered slightly. "I can handle that," she replied. "I will handle it." "I know you will," Rafe said immediately. No hesitation. No doubt. "I'm not saying you can't." He stood up slowly, walking a few steps closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance just enough to feel more personal. "I'm saying I want to." The room felt quieter now. Darcy could hear her own heartbeat. This wasn't about money. She could tell. That's what made it complicated. "She's your daughter," Rafe continued. "You're doing everything right. I can see that." He paused. "But I have more than I need." His voice dropped slightly. "And she has less than she deserves." Darcy looked down for a second. That line, it cut deeper than anything else, because it was true, and truth always finds its way in. "I don't want anything in return," he added quickly. "No expectations. No strings." Darcy let out a slow breath. People always said that. In her experience, it was rarely true. "I don't do favors," she said quietly. Rafe tilted his head slightly. "Then don't call it that." Another silence. Longer this time. He watched her carefully. Waiting. not pushing. And that patience made it harder. Because pressure is easy to resist. Kindness isn't. Finally, Darcy spoke. If we do this, she said slowly. If I agree. Rafe didn't interrupt. You let her choose, she continued. All of it. A small shift passed across his face. Almost like the beginning of a smile. Of course. She's picky, Darcy added softly. There was a hint of warmth in her voice now. A glimpse of the mother beneath all the strength. She knows what she likes. I respect that, Rafe said. And this time, there was no hesitation at all. Darcy looked at him one last time. Measuring. Weighing. Not just the offer, but the man. Then she nodded. Okay. The word was quiet, but it changed everything. Rafe exhaled, just slightly, like he'd been holding something in longer than he realized. Thank you, he said. Darcy shook her head gently. This isn't for you. I know, he replied, and something about the way he said it made her believe him. From the hallway outside, a small voice echoed faintly. Mama? Darcy turned instantly. That one word, soft and searching, shifted her entire focus. She moved toward the door, but paused for just a second. Not turning fully. Just enough to say, she likes pink. Rafe nodded. I figured. Darcy stepped out. And as the door closed behind her, Rafe stood there alone in the quiet room, thinking about a little girl, a missing shoelace, and a hole in the front of a tiny pink shoe that somehow had found its way into his life and refused to leave. The house returned to its quiet rhythm after Darcy left the room. But something in that quiet had changed. Rafe didn't sit back down. He remained standing for a moment, staring at nothing in particular, like his mind was trying to catch up with what had just happened. Okay. Such a small word. Yet it carried more weight than any deal he had ever closed. He had spent years making decisions that moved money, power, people, but none of those had ever felt like this. This felt personal, uncontrolled, and unfamiliar. He ran a hand slowly across the table, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He hesitated, just for a second. Then he made the call. It rang once, twice. Yeah. Wendell's voice came through, sharp and alert as always. I'm stepping out, Rafe said. A pause. That alone was unusual. Where? Wendell asked. To buy shoes. Silence. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Just silence. You're joking, Wendell said flatly. I'm not. Another pause, longer this time. Wendell exhaled slowly on the other end. In 13 years, he said, you've never cleared your schedule for anything that wasn't business. Rafe didn't respond. Because there wasn't anything to explain. And somehow, Wendell understood that. All right, Wendell said finally, voice quieter now. Be careful. The line went dead. Rafe lowered the phone and stood there for a moment longer. Then he moved. Not with urgency, but with intention. And for the first time in years, he was heading somewhere that had nothing to do with power. Darcy stood in the kitchen, crouched slightly in front of Bria, fixing a loose strand of her hair. You stay close to me, okay? She said softly. Bria nodded, holding Mr. Patch tightly under her arm. Her eyes were bright, curious, like something exciting was about to happen. Are we going somewhere? She asked. Darcy hesitated for a second. Then she nodded. Yes. Bria's face lit up instantly. Can Mr. Patch come? Darcy smiled faintly. Of course he can. From behind them, footsteps approached. Darcy stood up straight. Rafe stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed but unfamiliar in this setting. He looked at Bria, and for a moment, the world outside disappeared again. "Ready?" he asked. Bria looked up at him seriously. "Are there pink shoes?" The question was direct, important. Rafe didn't even hesitate. "There are a lot of pink shoes." She considered that, then nodded. "Okay. I'm ready." Darcy reached for her hand, instinctively. But Bria stepped forward first, closer to Rafe. Not touching him, just trusting. That quiet trust hit harder than anything else. Rafe glanced at Darcy briefly. She saw it, that flicker in his expression, the weight of something he didn't say. Then they walked out together. The air outside was cooler, fresh, the kind of ordinary day that didn't hint at anything changing. Rafe's car was already waiting, clean, silent, expensive. Darcy slowed for just a second. She wasn't used to stepping into places like this. She wasn't used to being invited into them. "You don't have to," she started. "I know," Rafe said gently, and that was enough. She nodded once, then helped Bria into the back seat. The drive was quiet at first. Not awkward, just careful. Bria sat between them, her legs swinging slightly, Mr. Patch resting in her lap. She looked out the window, eyes wide. Everything was interesting to her. Every building, every passing car. "Do rich people always live in big houses?" she asked suddenly. Darcy stiffened slightly. But Rafe answered. "Some do," he said. "Some don't." Bria nodded like that made perfect sense. "My house is small," she said. "But Mama says it's enough." Rafe glanced at Darcy. She was looking out the window now. But he could see it, that quiet strength in her. The way she held her world together with simple words. "Your Mama's right," he said. Bria smiled, satisfied. The car came to a stop in front of a bright, clean storefront. Glass windows. Rows of shoes displayed neatly. Darcy hesitated again as they stepped out. Places like this, she had only ever passed by. Never entered. Rafe noticed. He didn't rush her. Didn't say anything. He just opened the door. And waited. After a second, she walked in. Bria's reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened. Her whole face lit up like she had just stepped into something magical. "Shoes!" she gasped. Rows and rows of them. Colorful. Shiny. New. She let go of Darcy's hand and walked forward slowly, like she was afraid they might disappear if she moved too fast. Rafe crouched slightly beside her. "Take your time," he said. "You can look at everything." Bria nodded seriously, like she had just been given an important responsibility. She moved from shelf to shelf, touching, looking, thinking. Darcy stood back for a moment, watching her. Watching the way her daughter explored something she had never had the chance to explore before. And something inside her. It hurt. Not because of what was happening now, but because of what hadn't happened before. Because of all the times she couldn't give her this. Rafe noticed that too. He didn't say anything. He just stood beside her quietly. "She's happy," he said after a moment. Darcy nodded. "Yeah." Her voice was soft, almost distant. Bria picked up a pair of shiny silver shoes, studied them carefully, then shook her head. "Too sparkly," she murmured. She moved on. A few steps later, she found them. Pink, soft, with tiny stars that lit up when you tapped the sole. She froze, then slowly picked them up, like she had just found something important. "Mama," she whispered. Darcy turned, and when she saw the shoes in Bria's hands, her throat tightened, because those shoes weren't just shoes. They were something else, something bigger. Bria looked at Rafe, eyes wide. "Can I try these?" Rafe nodded gently. "Of course." Bria sat down carefully. Rafe helped her slip them on, and when her feet touched the floor, the stars lit up, small, pink, blinking with every step. Bria stood there, staring down at her feet. Then she took a step, another, and then she smiled. The kind of smile that didn't need words. Darcy turned away slightly, blinking fast, trying to hold herself together. Because moments like this, they were beautiful, but they also reminded you of everything you had been fighting against. Rafe stood up slowly, watching her. Not just the shoes, not just the moment, but the meaning behind it. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something settle inside his chest. Something steady. Something real. Bria turned suddenly and ran back toward him, the lights blinking with every step. "Look," she said, laughing softly. Rafe nodded. "I see." But his voice had changed. Quieter. Heavier. Because somewhere deep inside, he realized this wasn't just about a pair of shoes anymore. And as he looked at Darcy, he knew this was only the beginning. Bria spun once in place, watching the lights blink beneath her feet like she had just discovered something magical that belonged only to her. "They sparkle when I walk," she whispered, half to herself, half to the world. Rafe's eyes followed every step she took. Not just watching, taking it in, memorizing it. Darcy turned back, steadying herself, and walked closer again. "They fit?" she asked softly. Bria nodded quickly. "Perfect." That word landed heavier than it should have. Perfect. A word that rarely existed in Darcy's world. Rafe glanced at the shelf, then back at Bria. "Want to try more?" he asked. Bria hesitated. She looked down at her feet again, then back at the rows of shoes. The choice mattered to her. You could see it in her face. "Maybe one more," she said carefully. Darcy almost smiled. That was her girl. Always measuring. Always making sure she didn't ask for too much. Rafe noticed that too, and something in his chest tightened. "Pick whatever you like," he said. Bria nodded, but she didn't rush. She moved slowly again, scanning the shelves like each option carried weight. She picked a pair of soft pink sneakers, then small rain boots with little designs, then another pair. Each time, she asked before trying them. Each time, she waited for approval. And each time, Rafe said yes, without hesitation. Darcy stood beside him now, arms folded lightly, watching it all unfold. "You don't have to say yes to everything," she said quietly. Her tone wasn't ungrateful. It was careful, grounded. Rafe kept his eyes on Bria. "I know." "Then why do you?" He paused for a second, then answered honestly. "Because I want to." Darcy looked at him. Really looked this time. And for a moment, she didn't see the man people feared. She saw someone trying to give something he couldn't quite explain. "She's not used to this," Darcy said softly. Rafe nodded. "I can tell." Bria came back holding two different pairs. "Which one is better?" she asked, holding them up. Darcy opened her mouth, but Rafe spoke first. "Which one do you like?" Bria frowned slightly. "I like both." "Then both are good," he said. She blinked. Like that answer didn't fully make sense. "But I can only pick one," she said. Darcy felt it again. That familiar ache. That instinct her daughter had learned too early. Limits. Always limits. Rafe crouched slightly to her level. Who told you that? Bria pointed gently at Darcy. Mama says you should choose one thing so other people can have things too. The words were simple, but they carried everything Darcy had been teaching her. Kindness, restraint, survival. Rafe glanced up at Darcy. Something passed between them. Understanding, respect, and something else, deeper. Then he looked back at Bria. Your mama's right, he said. Bria nodded, satisfied. Then he added, but today we're not choosing like that. She tilted her head. What do you mean? Rafe smiled faintly. Today you choose what makes you happy. Bria looked down at the shoes again, then back at him. Carefully. You mean both? Yes. She didn't smile right away. She processed it, made sure she understood. Then slowly, her face lit up again. Okay. Darcy turned her face slightly, exhaling through her nose. That quiet mix of emotions building again. Gratitude, relief, and something harder to name. They moved toward the counter with more boxes than Darcy felt comfortable carrying. She reached for one. Rafe gently took it from her. I've got it. I can help, she said. I know, he replied. But you don't have to right now. That line settled somewhere deeper than it should have. Because for Darcy, not having to do everything alone was unfamiliar. Almost uncomfortable. They stepped outside again. The afternoon felt different now. Brighter. Softer. Bria held onto the bag tightly, like it might disappear if she let go. She looked up at Rafe. Thank you, she said seriously. Rafe nodded. You're welcome. Bria lifted Mr. Patch slightly. He says thank you too. Rafe's expression shifted. Softened. Tell him he's very welcome. Bria thought about that. Then, without warning, she lifted her arms toward him. A simple gesture. Natural. Trusting. Pick me up. Rafe froze for a split second. Just a second. Like his body wasn't used to responding to something like that. Then slowly, carefully, he bent down and picked her up. Awkward at first. Then steadier. Bria settled against his shoulder like she belonged there. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. Her light-up shoes blinked softly with every small movement. Darcy watched. And something inside her shifted again. Because this wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't something she had calculated. And that scared her more than anything. Rafe adjusted his hold slightly, noticing how light she was. How small. And how heavy that felt at the same time. Comfortable? He asked quietly. Bria nodded against his shoulder. Yeah. They walked toward the car. Slowly. Like none of them wanted to rush the moment. The city moved around them. Cars passing. People talking. Life going on. But inside that small space, something else was happening. Something quieter. Something bigger. Rafe opened the door with one hand, still holding Bria. Darcy placed the bags inside carefully. They got in. And as the car pulled away, Bria rested her head lightly against Rafe's shoulder. Her eyes slowly closing. Safe. Completely safe. Darcy sat beside them, watching, thinking, feeling everything at once. She should have felt relief. She should have felt grateful. And she did. But there was something else growing underneath it all. A question. A quiet, persistent question. Because moments like this, they don't come without a cost. And as she looked at the man holding her daughter so carefully, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to think about before. She didn't know what his world really looked like. Not fully. And suddenly, she wasn't sure she wanted her daughter getting too close to it. The car moved through the city in silence, and Darcy sat there, holding on to that thought, as it slowly began to take shape into something she couldn't ignore anymore. The car slowed to a quiet stop in front of the mansion. Darcy was the first to move. Carefully, gently, she reached over and brushed a loose curl away from Bria's face. The little girl was asleep now, her breathing soft and steady, her small hand still loosely holding onto Rafe's sweater like she didn't want to let go even in her dreams. For a second, Darcy didn't say anything. She just watched. Then she spoke, low and careful. "I'll take her." Rafe didn't move right away. He looked down at Bria, her head resting against him, the faint glow of the shoes blinking once, then fading as her feet stilled. Something in his chest tightened. Not pain. Something else. Something unfamiliar. "She's okay," he said quietly. "I know," Darcy replied. And she did. That wasn't the issue. That was exactly the issue. After a brief pause, Rafe shifted slightly, helping Darcy ease Bria into her arms. The movement was slow, almost reluctant, like handing something over that he hadn't realized he had started to hold on to. Bria stirred for a moment. Her fingers tightened lightly in Darcy's shirt, then relaxed again. Darcy adjusted her carefully against her shoulder, instinctively, like she had done 1,000 times before. "I'll put her in the kitchen for a bit," she said. Rafe nodded once. Darcy stepped out of the car. The air felt different now. Heavier. Or maybe it was just her. She walked inside, holding Bria close, her steps steady but her thoughts anything but. In the kitchen, she laid Bria gently on the small couch, covering her with a light throw. Mrs. Aldridge glanced over, smiling softly. "Long day?" she asked. Darcy nodded. "Good day," she said. But even as she said it, there was something behind her words. Something unsettled. She turned back toward the hallway. And stopped. Rafe was standing there. He hadn't gone to his office. Hadn't taken a call. He had followed her in. Not close. Just enough to be there. Watching. Darcy walked toward him slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said it. "You didn't have to carry her." Rafe tilted his head slightly. "I didn't mind. That's not what I meant." He waited. Darcy crossed her arms lightly, not defensive, just grounding herself. "She gets attached," she said. The words were calm, but they carried weight. Rafe's expression didn't change. "She's a kid," he replied. "That's what kids do." Darcy nodded once. "Yes." A pause. Then, "And that's exactly why I have to be careful." There it was. The line. Clear. Unavoidable. Rafe looked at her differently now. More focused. "What are you saying?" Darcy held his gaze. "I'm saying, today was kind." She chose her words slowly. "More than kind." Another pause. "But things like this, they don't just stay small." Rafe's jaw tightened slightly. "You think I'm going to hurt her?" The question came out sharper than intended. Darcy shook her head immediately. "No." And she meant it. "I don't think that." Silence stretched between them. Then she continued. "I think you live in a world I don't understand." Her voice softened slightly. "And I think my daughter doesn't understand it either." Rafe didn't interrupt. "She sees you as—" Darcy hesitated, searching for the right word. "Safe." That word hung in the air. Heavy. Complicated. "And maybe you are," she added quietly. "But I don't know that." There was no accusation in her tone. No blame. Just truth. And it landed harder than anything else could have. Rafe looked away for a moment. toward the kitchen, toward the place where Bria was sleeping, then back at Darcy. "You're right," he said. Simple. Direct. That wasn't the answer she expected. "I don't live a simple life," he continued. "There are things around me that don't belong anywhere near a child." Darcy listened carefully, because this was the first time he had come close to saying it out loud. "Not details, but enough. And that's exactly my point," she said. Rafe stepped a little closer. Not invading, just closing distance. "Nothing from that world comes near her," he said. His voice was steady now. Certain. Darcy searched his face, looking for cracks, for hesitation, for anything that felt uncertain. She didn't find it. "And you can promise that?" she asked. Rafe didn't blink. "Yes." No pause. No doubt. Darcy exhaled slowly. Because promises, they mattered. But only if they were real. "You don't make promises lightly," she said. Rafe shook his head. "No." Another silence. But this one felt different. Less tense. More grounded. Darcy uncrossed her arms. "I'm not trying to push you away," she said quietly. "I just—" She stopped. Her voice softened even more. "I don't get second chances with her." That landed deep, because Rafe understood that kind of thinking, that kind of responsibility. "If something goes wrong," she continued, "I'm the one who has to fix it." Rafe nodded once. "I understand." And he did. More than she knew. Darcy looked at him for a long moment. Then finally, "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the shoes. For everything." Rafe didn't respond right away. Then, "She smiled," he said quietly. Darcy's expression shifted slightly. Softened. "Yeah," she whispered. "She does that." Rafe let out a small breath. "I haven't seen that in a while." Darcy studied him. And for the first time, she saw something behind his words. Not just observation. Memory. Loss. "You used to?" she asked gently. Rafe didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved past her, somewhere distant, then back again. "A long time ago." Darcy nodded. She didn't push further. Some things didn't need to be explained to be understood. From the kitchen, a small sound stirred. Bria shifted slightly on the couch. A soft murmur escaped her lips. Both of them turned instinctively. Darcy moved first. But Rafe stayed where he was, watching. As Darcy knelt beside her daughter, brushing her hand lightly across her forehead. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm right here." Bria settled again. Her breathing steady. Peaceful. Darcy stayed there for a moment longer. Then stood up slowly. She turned back toward Rafe. And for a brief second, there was no distance between them. No rich. No poor. No power. No fear. Just two people, standing in the same quiet moment, trying to understand what this was becoming, and whether it was something they could hold on to, or something that would eventually break. Rafe glanced toward the hallway, then back at Darcy. "There's something you should know," he said. His tone had changed. Lower. More serious. Darcy felt it immediately. Her chest tightened slightly. "What?" she asked. Rafe hesitated. Just for a second. And in that hesitation, something shifted again. Because whatever he was about to say, it wasn't small. Darcy didn't move. Something in the way he said that, it stopped her. "What is it?" she asked again, quieter this time. Rafe looked toward the kitchen one more time, making sure Bria was still asleep, still safe in that small, peaceful world she lived in. Then he stepped slightly to the side, lowering his voice. "There are people," he said carefully, "who pay attention to where I go, who I spend time with." Darcy felt it immediately. That shift, the one she had been afraid of, finally stepping into the light. "And if they notice something unusual," he continued, "they start asking questions." Her arms slowly folded again, not out of defense, but instinct. "What kind of questions?" she asked. Rafe met her eyes. "The kind that don't stay as questions for long." Silence settled between them. Heavy. Real. Darcy swallowed slowly. "You're saying, bringing her here, being around you." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Rafe did it for her. Could make things complicated. That was a careful word. Complicated. But both of them knew it meant more than that. Darcy let out a slow breath, her gaze drifting briefly toward the kitchen. Toward her daughter. Her entire world. "And today?" she asked. "Was that complicated?" Rafe didn't answer immediately. He was thinking. Not calculating. Thinking. "Yes," he said finally. "Honest. Straight." Darcy nodded once. She appreciated that more than anything else. No lies. No softening. Just truth. "I had someone watching the street," he added. Her eyes flickered slightly. "I figured," she said. Of course she had. She noticed everything. That was how she survived. "They saw us," he continued. Darcy's jaw tightened just a little. "And now?" Rafe exhaled slowly. "Now, it depends on what they think they saw." That wasn't comforting. But it was real. And somehow, that mattered more. Darcy walked a few steps away, running a hand lightly across her arm, grounding herself. "This is exactly what I was worried about," she said quietly. Rafe didn't argue. Because she was right. "And you still chose to do it," she added. That wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. Rafe stepped closer again. "Yes." Another pause. "Because leaving her like that wasn't an option for me." Darcy turned back toward him. And there it was again. That strange pull between them. Conflict and understanding existing at the same time. "You don't get to make choices like that for us," she said. Her voice wasn't raised. But it was firm. Rafe nodded once. "I know." That answer stopped her for a second. Because she expected resistance. Not agreement. "But I did," he added quietly. "And I'd probably do it again." That honesty hit harder. Darcy shook her head slightly. "That's not how this works." "Then tell me how it works," Rafe said. There was no challenge in his voice. Just willingness. Darcy hesitated. Because the truth was, she wasn't used to explaining herself. She was used to adjusting. Surviving. Not being asked. "You don't step into someone's life like that," she said finally. "You don't change things, unless you're ready to stay." The words hung there. Clear. Sharp. Real. Rafe didn't look away. "I'm not planning on disappearing." Darcy's eyes searched his. "That's not enough." Another silence. "You don't understand what it's like for her," Darcy continued. Her voice softened, but the emotion in it deepened. "She doesn't meet people like you. People who show up, do something big, and then what? What happens when you get busy?" she asked. "When something pulls you away. When your world demands something she doesn't understand." Rafe's expression shifted slightly. Because those weren't hypotheticals. That was his reality. "She'll think she did something wrong," Darcy said. "She'll think she lost something." Her voice dropped. "And I'll be the one explaining it to her." That landed deeper than anything else. Because it wasn't about him. It was about her. About Bria. About the kind of quiet pain kids carry when they don't understand why something good disappeared. Rafe ran a hand across the back of his neck slowly. "You think I'm temporary," he said. Darcy didn't answer right away. Because the truth was complicated. "I think your life is," she said finally. And that was even harder. Rafe let out a slow breath. Then stepped closer again. Not forceful. Just present. "I've been living the same way for a long time," he said. "Nothing changes. Nothing slows down." His voice was quieter now. More honest. Today, something did. Darcy watched him carefully. Because she could hear it. That shift. That unfamiliar tone. "I don't know what this is yet," he admitted. "But I know I don't want it to be temporary." That wasn't a promise. But it wasn't empty either. It was something in between. Darcy looked down for a moment. Thinking. Weighing. Because this wasn't just about feelings. It was about risk. Real risk. "I need boundaries," she said finally. Rafe nodded immediately. "Tell me." She lifted her eyes again. "If you're in her life, it has to be clean." "Clean," he repeated. "No shadows," she clarified. "No people watching. No complications following us home." Rafe held her gaze. "That's not always in my control." Darcy's expression didn't change. "Then neither is this." That was the line. Clear. Unmoving. Rafe understood it instantly. And for the first time, he didn't have a quick answer. Because she wasn't asking for effort. She was asking for something bigger. Something harder. Control over a world that didn't always listen. From the kitchen, Bria shifted again. A soft little voice, barely awake. "Mama." Darcy turned immediately. But before she walked away, she looked back at Rafe. And in that look, there was no anger. No fear. Just truth. "This isn't just about kindness," she said quietly. "It's about what comes after." She turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving Rafe standing there, alone in the hallway, with something he hadn't felt in a long time pressing down on him. Not pressure. Not danger. Responsibility. Real responsibility. And as he stood there, listening to Darcy's soft voice comforting her daughter, he realized something that unsettled him more than anything else she had said. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he had enough control over his own world to protect something this fragile. Rafe stood there for a long time after Darcy walked away. He didn't follow her. Didn't speak. He just listened. Her voice in the kitchen, soft, steady, the way she spoke to Bria when the world needed to feel safe again. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mama's here." Those words carried something he hadn't heard in years. Something steady. Something real. And for the first time, it made him feel the weight of everything he had built. Not pride. Wait. He turned slowly and walked down the hallway, past the silent rooms, past the polished walls that reflected a life that had always been about control. But now, control didn't feel like enough. He stepped into his office and closed the door behind him. The room felt colder than usual. He stood there for a moment, then reached for his phone. The call connected almost instantly. "Yeah." Wendell answered. Rafe didn't sit. "She's right," he said. A pause. On the other end, silence. Wendell knew exactly who he meant. "That's a dangerous place to stand," Wendell replied quietly. "I know." Then step back. Rafe closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. "I can't." Another pause. Longer this time. You're thinking with something you haven't used in a long time, Wendell said. Yeah. And that's exactly what gets men like us killed. Rafe walked toward the window, looking out at the city, at everything he had built, at everything that had cost him pieces of himself. I've been alive for years, he said slowly. But I haven't been living. Wendell didn't answer, because there was nothing to argue with. I'm not walking away from this, Rafe continued. Then you better be ready to change how you do things, Wendell said. That was the truth. Simple, sharp, unavoidable. Rafe nodded, even though Wendell couldn't see it. I already am. The line went quiet. Then Wendell spoke again, softer this time. Then I'll handle the noise. Rafe ended the call. And for the first time, he wasn't thinking about risk. He was thinking about what it would take to make something right. Days passed. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just steady. And slowly, things began to shift. The car that used to sit across the street disappeared. The quiet eyes that watched from a distance stopped watching. The house felt different. Not because anything was said, but because something had changed behind the scenes. Rafe didn't explain it. He didn't need to. Darcy noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. One evening, she stood in the kitchen again, drying her hands, watching Bria sitting at the counter with Mr. Patch, quietly talking to herself. Peaceful. Safe. She glanced toward the hallway. Rafe was there. Not in a rush. Not distracted. Just there. He had been like that more often. Present. Consistent. And that was what mattered. Not the shoes. Not the money. Consistency. She walked toward him slowly. You've been quiet, she said. Rafe gave a small nod, trying to listen more. Darcy studied him for a moment. Then, the car's gone. Rafe didn't pretend. Yeah. And the people? Handled. She held his gaze. How? Rafe paused, then answered honestly. I made it clear. Some things aren't part of my world anymore. Darcy's expression didn't change, but something inside her shifted. You can do that? She asked. Rafe gave a faint, almost tired smile. I can do anything I decide to do. That wasn't arrogance. That was truth. Darcy looked down for a second, then back at him. And you decided this? Rafe didn't hesitate. Yes. The word settled between them. Heavy. Certain. From the kitchen, Bria's voice called out. Mama. Look. They both turned. Bria jumped down from the chair and ran toward them, her light-up shoes blinking with every step. She held up a drawing. Crayon. Messy. Bright. 3 figures. A small one. A taller one. And another beside them. All holding hands. That's us, she said proudly. Darcy crouched slightly, smiling. It is. Bria nodded. That's you, that's me, and that's him. She pointed at Rafe. Darcy's breath caught for just a second. Not from surprise. From what it meant. Rafe didn't move. Didn't speak. He just looked at the drawing. Then at Bria. Then at Darcy. And in that moment, something became clear. Not perfect. Not simple. But real. Darcy stood slowly. Her eyes met his again. And this time, there was no distance. No hesitation. Just understanding. You don't get to walk away now, she said quietly. Rafe shook his head. I'm not going anywhere. Bria slipped her small hand into his. Naturally. Like it had always belonged there. And Rafe looked down at it. That tiny hand. Trusting him without question. And something inside him finally settled. the part of him that had been running for years, stopped, because in the end, it wasn't power that changed him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't money. It was a little girl in torn shoes, who walked into his life without asking, and reminded him what it meant to care again. That sometimes, the richest man in the room is the one who finally learns how to love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and tell me in the comments which country you're watching from.